This is Intelligence Matters, sponsored by Flare, a leader in providing actionable cyber threat intelligence to companies and governments around the world.
Asfandyar Mir is an expert on South Asian issues. He is currently a senior expert at the United States Institute of Peace, where, among other things, he briefs senior U.S. officials. He joins me today to talk about the critically important country of Pakistan. We'll be right back with that discussion after a quick break. I'm Michael Morell, and this is Intelligence Matters. The lines between geopolitical risk and cyber risk are blurring. Flare is a next-generation, continuous threat exposure management SaaS platform that equips corporate information security teams with world-class collection and continuous monitoring across dark web cybercrime forums, markets, Telegram channels, and sources of geopolitical risk. Flare sets up in 30 minutes, creates actionable intelligence from hour one, and is used by governments, security teams, and threat intelligence teams around the world. You can try Flare's free trial at their website, flare.io. That's flare.io. Asfandyar, welcome to Intelligence Matters. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Michael. It's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Terrific. Remind me, but I believe we met at the University of Chicago in the fall of 2016. I was teaching a seminar on intelligence, and you were finishing up your PhD. And I remember we first met over coffee at the famous Co-op bookstore. Is that right? Does that ring a bell?
That is correct, Michael. I was in fact thinking back to when we first connected, and I was doing my PhD in political science at the University of Chicago, where I believe you also started a PhD in economics, I want to say.
No. I was going to, right? I was headed there, but
Okay.
I ended up at the agency instead.
Okay.
So it'd be interesting to know where I would be if I had not gone to the agency, but had gone to Chicago. I'd probably be teaching economics somewhere.
I think you would have been a top economist somewhere, but I did pursue my PhD there. I finished up around that time, and that's where we first met, and we got a chance to exchange notes on South Asia, on counterterrorism issues. So,
Right.
So it's great to reconnect.
Right, absolutely. And then since then we've exchanged emails from time to time when something interesting happens in South Asia, and I've valued our back and forth. So it's great to have you on the show. So let's jump right in. Topic today is going to be Pakistan. Although I do want to ask you at the end about Al-Qaeda, because I know you're writing a piece right now about the state of Al-Qaeda. So I absolutely want to ask you about that. So Pakistan. So Asfandyar, when I was deputy director, I visited Pakistan more than any other country. That's no surprise, right? Because Al-Qaeda was, the fundamental issue of that time. The number one focus of our government and of CIA at that time. So I visited. I spent a lot of time talking to Pakistani officials, getting to know them. I read a great deal about the country, and I talked to many experts on Pakistan, both inside the CIA and outside the CIA. And at that time, Asfandyar, I felt that Pakistan was one of the most dangerous countries in the world. And, the logic there had kind of two pieces. One was a failing governance system, a struggling, if not failing economy, growing radicalization, which could take you down one dangerous path in a country with nuclear weapons. And then the other path, right, was just the ongoing tension with India and the risks of conventional war and, the potential spillover to nuclear war. So I saw this country, as dangerous. Would you have considered it the same at the time? And And how do you think about that question today in terms of the risks associated with Pakistan? Big picture, and then we'll drill down.
Sure. Michael, at the time you were the deputy director and later as acting director, Pakistan was indeed passing through a very dangerous moment. It was an existential challenge to the country's survival. The terrorist threat problem at the time, spearheaded by the TTP in partnership with Al-Qaeda, was indeed a challenge to the survival of the country. And in 2009, things got very scary when the TTP captured this region in northwest Pakistan called Swat, which was 60, 70 miles away from Islamabad, and alarm bells start going off in Washington. And of course, the fact that Pakistan is a nuclear-armed nation, I think, was a source of great anxiety for the Obama administration, but others in the region. I think other global powers, Beijing, London, were also very concerned about that. The rivalry with India certainly was a big challenge. It has been a deep sort of part of Pakistani sort of national fabric and character. And unfortunately, that shows no sign of abating. That has persisted ever since. What has changed is that Pakistan overcame that challenge of the level of terror violence that beset the country. It went down considerably, and there was a turnaround, and Pakistan appeared to be more resilient. It seemed like it had finally turned a corner. Unfortunately, in the last few years, some of the same problems have come back, in particular since the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan. The TTP has re-emerged and is starting to put a lot of pressure on the Pakistani state. Once again, it has a full backing of the Taliban. So we're not quite there yet. But the fact that the country has a lot of economic problems, Pakistan is about to enter into a 24th IMF program. So that economic weakness, perennial economic weakness, combined with the terrorism problem, really keeps Pakistan in this sort of state of fragility. And therefore, what I believe has to be a top U.S. national security concern.
Absolutely. That's the bottom line here, right? This is a country that is incredibly important in the world, in the region, and we have to pay attention to it. And it's not just the U.S. government that needs to pay attention to it, but it's broader than that, right? The media needs to pay attention. Academics need to pay attention. Think tanks need to pay attention. This is a critically important country.
I agree. And of course, I'm biased here because I study Pakistan.
Yeah. It's your business, right?
It's my business.
Sort of mine too. So,
but it's, I think there's so much going on in the world right now. There's so many other pressing priorities. And there's a fair bit of Pakistan fatigue as well in Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, people who have dealt with the country. We can talk about the ongoing sort of debate on Pakistan. And I think we begin to sort of lose sight of the bigger picture here, and the frustration on dealing with a crafting policy toward Pakistan gets the better of us. I think the outcome in Afghanistan, what happened there, people blame Pakistan for that. It's funny. I feel at times people are more emotional about Pakistan than they are about the Taliban. And so in that sense, I'm with you that this is an important part of the world. We need to keep paying attention, and it's tough. I recognize. I'm not in denial about that.
Yeah. So let's dig a little deeper, Asfandyar. Let's start with Pakistani politics. We're in a post-election period, somewhat contentious. There was a parliamentary election on March 9th. I want to ask you, why was it contentious? Where are we now? And perhaps most important, can you put the current state of Pakistani politics into a broader historical context, right? Is this business or usual? Are things getting worse, better? How do you think about Pakistani politics today? So if you can kind of let's capture that to start.
Sure. So, look, political stability in Pakistan has always been elusive over the 70-year history of the country. And the country has seen multiple coups by the army. The last one was in the year 1999, which brought General Pervez Musharraf, to power. He ruled the country until about 2008, when General Musharraf finally stepped down and the country transitioned to democratic rule. And it has had regular elections since. So there are multiple political parties, large parties. There is political competition between those parties. But at the same time, the army has remained very powerful in the country, not just on foreign policy, security policy issues that you worked on, but also on the domestic political scene. And that has led to a form of politics in the country referred by both analysts and scholars as hybrid rule. So people call it hybrid politics, or refer to Pakistan as a hybrid regime, neither authoritarian nor sort of fully democratic, but something in the middle with a mix of civilian and military elements or pillars of power. The last election that you were referring to, which took place in February, saw considerable controversy and political turmoil within the sort of the context of this hybrid politics. And really the controversy started in 2018, when the military, which has this habit of picking favorites, on the domestic political scene, it backed the cricketer turned politician Imran Khan into power. And he became the prime minister after an election. He was certainly very popular as well, a charismatic figure, top athlete of his time. Many Pakistanis felt he represented them well on the international stage. In fact, when he came to the US in 2019, President Trump seemed to really like him as well. But in 2022, Khan lost power in a parliamentary sort of vote of no confidence. And in the process fell out with the top military leadership. And he blamed the military as having engineered his ouster. But he went a step further, and he said the military did that in cahoots with the U.S. government. He said that the military and the U.S. Combined forces to stage a regime change operation, his words. And he directed his ire at one particular U.S. official, the current Assistant Secretary for South and Central Asia, Don Lu, sort of framed him as the mastermind of this particular operation. Of course, should go without saying, the charge of U.S. involvement was patently false. But Khan is now in jail on various charges, ranging from graft to mishandling of classified information. He, of course, maintains that these cases are motivated. But I guess more importantly, his relationship with the military leadership has gone from bad to worse. And it seems that the military really views him as a destructive character. And so, this confrontation between Khan and military really defines today's Pakistani sort of domestic political scene. Nevertheless, we had an election. This election saw, compared to Pakistani levels, significant participation, competition as well, but there were irregularities as per various local and foreign observers. In the final tally, Khan's party did well, especially given he was in jail. But other parties, the party of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, called the PMLN, and the party of the late former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, the Pakistan People's Party, which was in charge of the country back when I guess you were dealing with the country. Well, the two parties won enough seats to cobble together a ruling coalition, and so they are now in charge of the country.
So this hybrid form of politics that you talked about, right? This sharing of power. Does the fact that the military is so influential, does that skew Pakistani policy in a way that's not healthy for the country over the long term, or is that overstating it?
Look, I think that's been the theory of kind of what ails Pakistan, not just in recent years, but going back historically, that it's the military which is more ideologically minded, is more vested in, say, a rivalry with India. It has all these projects overseas in Afghanistan, wants more military capability, nuclear weapons. I agree with that. Historically, the military has sort of given the impetus for some of these policies, which have proven to be counterproductive. In 2023, 2024, there's a lot of water under the bridge, and the political parties have either lost the will or the capacity to formulate an alternative vision for the country. And so even if this civil-military imbalance was somehow magically to be corrected, I am not sure that the political parties would pursue an altogether different path than the one that the military is keen on. And I'll also note that there are signs that there is some learning on the part of the military. So we can talk about this in detail. The hostility with India is high, considerable, but in certain dimensions, it appears more managed. And on the other hand, the civilians now seem to be more wary of taking big steps when it comes to India because of fear of being penalized, domestic political.
So the second issue I want to ask about, Asfandyar, is the militant threats. I want to come back to that. We talked about that a little bit. Pakistani Taliban, you mentioned it. Significant threat when I was dealing with the country, eased a bit, and now you said it's coming back. Why is that? Why did the problem get better, and now why is it getting worse again? And how would you characterize what the threat is from the Pakistani Taliban? How to think about the nature of the threat?
Sure. So the insurgency in Pakistan, you could really trace it back to the early 2000s. After the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, there was an influx of the fighting forces of Al-Qaeda, as well as elements of the Taliban in the direction of Pakistan. And indeed, there was, at the time, a lot of anger toward the then government for siding with the United States post 9/11. So there was that rallying cry.
It's a decision that President Musharraf made.
Absolutely, right. And there was deep anger in mainland Pakistan, but in particular in the tribal areas. And that's when the insurgency erupted, and it kept escalating. The fact that Al-Qaeda was involved, deeply involved, the foreign fighter element that added to the lethality of the insurgency. And by 2008, 2009, we had this grouping called the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, which emerged as a brutal, formidable insurgent force carrying out suicide bombings across the country. And the TTP, of course, attempted attacks against the United States as well, both in the region. Infamously, TTP struck a CIA forward base in eastern Afghanistan, killing 7 agency officers, attempted to
coast
Afghanistan. And it attempted to strike in New York as well. And so the violence in Pakistan was very high. The TTP controlled a lot of territory in northwestern Pakistan. And my diagnosis is there was a combination of Pakistani military operations combined with the U.S. drone campaign, which really escalated in early 2009 in Pakistan under the Bush administration.
Started with the Bush administration and then was continued, actually accelerated by the Obama administration. Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah. So the last year of the Bush administration, there was a ramp up, and the Obama administration really sort of took the baton. And that exerted a lot of pressure on the insurgency, wiped out all of its top leadership. In fact, to this day, the Pakistanis have not managed to kill even a single top leader of the TTP. It was the United States which took out the TTP's leadership, and then Pakistani military was able to get territory lost to the TTP back. And so from 2017 through 2020, 2021, violence was at an all-time low in the country. The country seemed to be not as fragile. But really, the Taliban's return to power, has changed the whole dynamic, the whole picture. And the Taliban are fully backing the TTP. They have provided the TTP with a sanctuary, safe haven. And the Taliban, who were, of course, backed by Pakistan and had an insurgency, had a safe haven and sanctuary in Pakistan. The Taliban have really defied Pakistan in that sense since taking power. And it seems like Taliban animus toward Pakistan, which we used to hear from some analysts, careful analysts in government, would tell us in 2015, 2016 that, look, the Taliban-Pakistan relationship is not as smooth, not as linear as people make it out to be. And it seems like they had a point. The Taliban don't like Pakistan. And Taliban fighters in particular, especially suicide bombers who didn't get a chance to blow themselves up during the war, have now turned against Pakistan. So as a result, 2023 was a very violent year for Pakistan. So northwest Pakistan is kind of on fire once again. There isn't as much violence in the mainland of the country, but it seems like TTP is pursuing a different strategy. They've learned from the Taliban, so their approach to violence is more calibrated, and they're really trying to hollow out Pakistani state authority control in parts of northwest Pakistan to sort of take that territory. But why? The question is, why are we here at this stage in 2021? Of course, the Taliban return to power is a big reason for this, but I think Pakistan has to take some responsibility as well. This is plain and simple blowback of Pakistani policy.
It is ironic, right? At the end of the day, because Pakistan, was hedging in terms of outcomes in Afghanistan and provided quite a bit of support to the Taliban. And you're right, it has absolutely blown back on them.
Right. And I think the Pakistani leadership is deeply upset about it, disappointed. There's anger even, and they're now starting to channel that anger toward the Taliban. And so in the last year, this doesn't make national news in the US, but Pakistan has put in place a coercive approach to put pressure on the Taliban to get them to stop supporting, giving sanctuary to the TTP. This coercive approach involves economic sanctions against the Taliban regime. And the Pakistanis have also made threats of military action and then followed up. So there have been cross-border airstrikes and raids by Pakistan inside Afghanistan against the TTP. And generally, I would say that the Pakistani posture has an echo of regime change threats, or at least that's how the Taliban are interpreting it. And as a result, the Pakistan-Taliban relationship has really nosedived.
And how bad could that get?
Look,
could it end up in war, or is that would it look different, right, than what we traditionally consider to be war?
That relationship is on a path of steady deterioration. And if we go by history, that when Islamabad's relationship with Kabul begins to deteriorate, that is not good news for Kabul. We've seen over the last four to 5 decades that a government in Kabul, which has ended up on the wrong side of the Pakistanis, has struggled to survive, to maintain power. The communists struggled. The Mujahideen who came out of the civil war with the communists, certainly they had that challenge. The Taliban could not last after, of course the U.S. invasion was the immediate factor, but Pakistan also pulled its support, and the Republic similarly had challenges. So I think people have that historical context in mind. And at least people in the region worry that this could get pretty bad if things continue on this track.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of our discussion with Asfandyar Mir.
Beacon Global Strategies is the premier national security advisory firm. Beacon works side by side with leading companies to help them understand national security policy, geopolitical risk, global technology policy, and federal procurement trends. Beacon's insight gives business leaders the decision advantage. Founded in 2013, Beacon develops and supports the execution of bespoke strategies to mitigate business risk, drive growth, and navigate a complex geopolitical environment. With a bipartisan team and decades of experience, Beacon provides a global perspective to help clients tackle their toughest challenges.
So I don't have any insight anymore into, U.S. intelligence operations, but I would think that the return of the TTP threat would be a great opportunity for the U.S. and Pakistan to work together on counterterrorism again. Does that make sense?
Look, Michael, there's a vibrant discussion on this topic, and the U.S. is certainly not looking to topple the Taliban. I think that much is clear, but wants to manage the threats coming out of Afghanistan against U.S. interests. And the top U.S. concern are, of course, the transnationals, Al-Qaeda, which is still lurking. We can talk about that. And then most immediately ISIS-K, which really showed its reach in March with the Moscow attack. The TTP's threat to U.S. interests is debated, I would argue, in 2024. And there are some people who say that, look, it's not our problem. Pakistan should really deal with it on its own. But others, like you, who have longer memories, who remember that TTP, working with Al-Qaeda, hit forward base Chapman, or, attempted an attack in New York City, they are more cautious. And they remind about the TTP's past and encourage a policy which should sort of take that risk in mind, that this threat can go in an unpredictable sort of a direction. And generally, people agree that TTP making gains in Pakistan is not a good outcome for the U.S. Ultimately, the U.S. needs at the least a modicum of assistance for counterterrorism efforts in the region from Pakistan. And the most important component of that right now is Pakistani airspace for accessing landlocked Afghanistan with forces not inside Afghanistan. The only way the U.S. can get any kind of visibility into Afghanistan is through Pakistani airspace. And my concern is that as the broader relationship continues to sort of diminish, there is the skepticism of working with Pakistan on the GDP. Whatever little CT relationship there is with Pakistan will come under more pressure, and the U.S. might be more exposed as a result.
The third area I'd like to explore, Asfandyar, is Pakistani-China relations. What brought them together? How deep is the tie? And what are the prospects for, say, Chinese military bases in Pakistan?
Look, Michael, when we think about Pakistan these days in Washington, that is the first question we ask, we try to address in our analysis of Pakistan. And the bottom line is that the Pakistan-China relationship is very strong. The two countries have really cheesy, corny euphemisms to describe the relationship: iron brotherhood, a friendship that is deeper than the oceans and higher than the mountains. It's there's some real romance in that relationship. But it really dates back to the 1960s. It's not a new relationship. It's sort of it's been there all along. Recently, some people have been wondering and saying things like that the two countries are bound by perhaps a shared animus of the U.S. or the sort of the U.S. global order. But in my view, really what has historically and in recent years driven that relationship is a shared cynicism of India. And you have to keep in mind Pakistani grand strategy, sort of navigating international politics. Pakistan, as a materially weaker state in its rivalry with India, has sought help from a great power. This has been true since the 1950s. So in the Cold War, Pakistan sought cover under U.S. alliance systems to fend off and pursue aims against India. But since the 2000s, as the U.S. sort of grew wary of offering help which might be useful against India, or the U.S.-India relationship began to improve, Pakistan increasingly turned to China. And indeed, sort of, anxiety about this recent expansion in U.S.-India relations has also reinforced China-Pakistan ties. On the side of China, I would argue that in Pakistan, they see a partner, an imperfect partner, but a partner nonetheless, perhaps potentially a future ally, which can potentially improve geographic access for military and economic benefits in this part of the world. And the Chinese certainly value Pakistan's role as a strategic counterweight to India. I think they want this rivalry to continue. And to that,
it's also going to be a counterterrorism partner for China as well. I mean,
I think the Chinese have been keen on that, but they have also been frustrated by the security threats that they have encountered in Pakistan. Chinese citizens have been killed. There's been an influx of Chinese money, developmental assistance, resources, personnel, as part of economic engagement with Pakistan, and security has been a big challenge, which has been a source of stress. I think the real strength of the relationship is the China-Pakistan military relationship, important capabilities of all Pakistani services, which at one point, at least some of them used to be American, are not now Chinese. And the Chinese, I think are doing this because, as I noted, they want to maintain a strategic balance with respect to India. But there are divergences. I think we should not flatten out the narrative and, not buy into the brotherhood. There is friction. There are divergence of interests. The Chinese don't like Pakistan's interest in balancing ties between China and the U.S. The Pakistani elites generally tilt toward the West and the U.S. The Chinese are not fond of that. The Pakistanis are also somewhat reluctant to back the Chinese vision of Asian security. So the Pakistanis are on board with multipolarity, but don't appear keen on a Chinese hegemony in Asia. When it comes to basing, look, this has been a discussion we've been having for almost a decade now. There's been this concern, especially because of China's economic influence over Pakistan, that even if Pakistan doesn't want this to happen, they could potentially arm twist Pakistan into having this kind of access. But careful watchers will tell you that the two sides aren't taking any obvious strides toward greater access for the PLA. So, for example, there is now a base in Cambodia, and Chinese assets have begun to show up there. We don't see such activity in Pakistan for now. We haven't seen any movement toward a mutual defense treaty arrangement, which may be required for this sort of an arrangement to emerge. So I think there is some friction there. I think the Pakistanis still want their relationship with the Western world, the United States in particular, and realize that if they were to do something like that, that would foreclose that option for once and for all. That being said, I think the state of U.S.-Pakistan relations and India-Pakistan tensions are important to watch. Those are important variables ultimately in the Pakistani calculus.
Yeah. Another reason to do that counterterrorism cooperation with them, for strategic reasons, right? One more Pakistan issue, Asfandyar, and that's Pakistani-Indian relations. You mentioned earlier that there's been some improvement. What's the source? Is there a potential long-term trend there, or is this something that we will always need to worry about?
Sure, yeah. Look, overall, India-Pakistan relations are tense. In fact, the two sides are not even on talking terms right now, barring some undisclosed back-channel talks. Overt diplomatic channels don't exist. They broke down back in 2019, so almost 5 years ago. when Pakistan expelled India's top diplomat in Islamabad after India revoked the autonomy of the disputed region of Kashmir. It was a big change by the Modi government. There's a lot of anger in Pakistan over that. And after the Pakistani expulsion, New Delhi reciprocated that expulsion fairly quickly. The silver lining, or what gives the relationship or this competition rivalry a sort of a steady state, is that there's a ceasefire between the two sides along the border in the disputed region of Kashmir, which was revived in 2021. So the two sides are not shooting at each other as they have historically, over the course of their history. And I think when we think about India-Pakistan tensions, we have to think about Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his political party, the BJP. Prime Minister Modi has pursued a more muscular, coercive approach to get Pakistan to stop the use of militancy and terror proxies, as well as, I would venture, to drop its sort of territorial claims such as those on Kashmir. And over the last decade, we have seen that Prime Minister Modi has gone from strength to strength, and Indian domestic politics has also rewarded this muscular nationalistic approach to Pakistan. Right. So India's strident approach on Pakistan has become much more entrenched. But there is a question due to India's border tensions with China, which erupted in the year 2020. The Chinese have brought a lot of force, along the border with India. Tens of thousands of forces is a real threat, a military threat that India faces now from China. So the question is that will that force a rethink in New Delhi on its approach to Pakistan?
Right.
The Pakistani leadership, I think their calculus is important to recognize. They have restrained these anti-India militants. Partly, I think U.S. Council has played a role. Senior U.S. leadership have been talking to Pakistanis over the last 20 years about this problem. And then back in 2021, there were some signs of bold conciliation, at least from the then top military leadership, outreach to India, sort of back channel talks that, look, let's have a conflict moratorium, let's turn a page. But that didn't go anywhere. Domestic politics in Pakistan sort of came in the way. And ultimately, I think the bottom line remains that even if Pakistan wants conciliation, it is in it's not in any mood to make major concessions on issues such as Kashmir.
Yeah. So let's take a couple minutes here and talk about Al-Qaeda. I was one of those analysts who worried deeply about an Al-Qaeda rebound, following our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Doesn't look like it happened, right? I thought what happened to ISIS-K would happen to Al-Qaeda. What's your sense of where Al-Qaeda is today?
So, full disclosure, I've been in a debate with some colleagues, other scholars on this particular issue. I've written out this debate because it's an important analytic issue on which scholars and analysts have different assumptions. They have different models to assess this particular problem. Look, Al-Qaeda is an old, mature jihadi organization. One of the oldest, one of the more experienced jihadi organization, has been around for 4 decades. And one of the most important sort of drivers, strategic drivers of this group and kind of what it has been able to pull off in the 40 years of its existence has been its relationship with the Taliban. And it has sought to protect that relationship. Bin Laden was, saw the value in that relationship, but was a bit reckless in sort of managing that relationship. I think he pushed his hosts, his Taliban hosts, really to the limit. And we still sort of debate as to what the Taliban knew about 9/11, whether it was signed off by the Taliban, Mullah Omar. Today's leadership of Al-Qaeda has approached the relationship with the Taliban sort of more, in a different fashion. And therefore, my sense is that Al-Qaeda is observing some of the strictures that the Taliban have laid down for them as part of, say, some of these negotiations that the Taliban had with the United States codified in the Doha Agreement.
Right.
I think the Taliban, because of that understanding, have asked Al-Qaeda to lay low, to not use Afghanistan as a stage or as a jumping point for international terrorism. Nevertheless, Al-Qaeda is still present in the country. We saw this most clearly in the return of, or in the emergence of, Ayman al-Zawahiri in downtown Kabul in less than a year of the Taliban takeover. And I mean, we can't downplay that, though I think analytically, at least in sort of our national conversation, it didn't get as much attention. But what a scandal that after multiple years of negotiating with the United States on that one particular point, that Al-Qaeda would not be given a haven, a place or a sanctuary in Afghanistan. The Taliban brought back the leader of Al-Qaeda, the number one person of Al-Qaeda to Kabul. And I think people who say that there's been sort of no regeneration of the threat, I just point them to Zawahiri being in Kabul in less than a year of the Taliban takeover. I will also note that I worry about Al-Qaeda's enduring sort of anti-US stance. The fact that, say, other jihadi groups have localized, some are looking at the PRC. You have a group like ISIS, which sort of looks in multiple different directions towards Russia, towards the PRC, including, towards us here in the United States. Al-Qaeda is still sort of razor focused on the United States, and this enduring intent, despite being hit in hundreds of drone strikes, which have eviscerated the top of that group, that in fact worries me. This sort of enduring commitment to the cause, the relationship with the Taliban, I think should be a source of concern. So the story's not over yet. I think we have to be mindful and vigilant. This is a more strategic organization than some of the recent analysis, tends to admit.
Yeah. Asfandyar, thank you so much for joining us. Really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Michael.
That was Asfandyar Mir. I'm Michael Morell. Please join us next week for another episode of Intelligence Matters.
Intelligence Matters is produced by Steve Dorsey with assistance from Ashley Berry and Sophia Rubin. Intelligence Matters is a production of Beacon Global Strategies.